Romi, now tell me a little bit about what's wrong with Indian cities in their present form, and are they really adequate to, for the years to come as the population grows, the cities become larger? Are they sustainable?
I think that the main problems that we are having in Indian cities are that they are so large that they have stopped functioning properly. And the migration into the cities has been so enormous that the level of human suffering and the discomfort level for more than half the population of the city is not acceptable. I think that the patterns of development that we have adopted in order to industrialize ourselves need to be looked at again, because they are urban centered. And my concern and worry is the fact that we have ended up getting some of the largest cities in the world. Now, if you belong to the middle class in India, you have visions of the city, you start thinking of New York and London and Boston. But when you come to India, you think that we should be like that. But the Asian city is very different a creature. So it needs to have a completely different form and content in order to cope with what we have in Asia as a problem. And our thinking and urban planning has got misplaced somewhere. We have got so seduced by urbanization theories of coming from the West that we believe that cities in themselves, regardless of the form they have, are good for us. But we've crossed the limit of what we would consider to be decent life, possible to have decent life in urban cities in India. I believe very deeply that the form of urbanization that we are now facing is inherently against good human life.
Now, you had a dialogue in Cambridge with the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. He also believed in natural cities, or he believes in natural cities. What were his ideas, and what was this dialogue about, and what came out of it?
Well, I think that when I was very troubled by this whole situation of the Asian city and the pattern of economic growth, I did turn to my old professor and I got an opportunity to have a discussion with him, which was recorded. And some of the issues that I had raised with him was, are mega cities inevitable? I mean, is it that this is a natural way of growing? And I think he did question it. And that is exactly the reason why we are thinking, is saying, no, we will not accept mega cities as being the inevitable solutions. Unfortunately, we are troubled by a whole vested interest in large cities. It's mostly to do with marketing and televisions and outreach, etc. Now, the other issue that I think I had discussed with Amartya Sen was about whether cities are necessary. This is an important question because ever since Mahatma Gandhi told us that the village is the center of the economy and we should be really helping out the villages, we have found that that's not been the case. We have not been able to address that problem, nor has it been of any interest to our planners. We have simply accepted that urbanization is inevitable. And one of the issues that he did raise in our discussion was whether there is a relationship that we can forge in the future between the village and the town. And I think he was right. He said that the city is a better place to live than the village. So we have, out of these discussions, and we had a lot of other discussions with philosophers, etc., we are evolving towards ideas which are about urbanization of the future, not rurification. We are looking at the relationship between food production and urbanization, for instance. So these things have come out of those discussions that we started with Amartya Sen and went on. I mean, what I find interesting is that we are living in the models of the 19th century, which were created by idealists and utopians who believed in organizing lives for other people. Whether it was socialism, whether it was Fabianism, whether it was capitalism, they all believed that they knew better for human beings what they needed. So they designed these cities and these utopias for them.
Well, talking about designing cities, a lot of people in India, a lot of planners, the government is looking towards the China model.
You see, the China model is the extreme form or the most intense form of believing in dense urbanization to increase your production quickly. So what China has done, and I've been there now a number of times, and I have discussed urbanization and cities there, what they believe is that there is an underlying feeling that the production center of the world will be China, and in order to produce, they have to have concentrations of population. And we are talking about industrial, technical production. So they have adopted a model of enormous megacities. Now, I believe that in India, this would be suicidal for us. Firstly, we don't live in the kind of democratic setup that China has. We are a country which has a completely different kind of population. Therefore, we should not think in formats in which a society which is controlled by the party and has limited democratic forms. We are in the process of deepening our democracy, going to the panchayat level, etc., which is very different. So we have to look for different forms. So as far as I am concerned, China holds, both Europe and China hold nothing for us to emulate.
So it has to be an indigenous model. So now coming to natural cities, can you give us an overview of it before we get into the specifics of what a natural city is about?
You see, I think I'd like to open up this question of what kind of person can think about cities. Traditionally, since the 19th century, it's been master planners and architects. Today, I'm saying that I think philosophers, economists are the right people to ask us as to what kind of life we should be having in the future. Now, our concerns about the nature of civilized society in India, in Asia, springs from the fact that our environment and our social framework is deteriorating very quickly. And it is both Vikram Soni's and my contention that this is being caused by urbanization of the wrong sort. However, we believe that if we are able to make a different pattern of urbanization, and it's interesting that Amartya Sen in his interview with me referred to the fact that we need much more information as to what are the alternatives available. So we are actually in the process of offering an alternative model, which has a different philosophy, which has a different economic base, and which the core of which is to do with democratic participation in the process. That is the hidden core, which is not apparent, doesn't have any physical form to show. But yes, unless we are self-sufficient in food, in energy, in water, in waste management, in economic livelihood, we can't survive the 21st century.
Now, to understand the natural city spatially, you've drawn up a chessboard pattern. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in the chessboard pattern, let me explain, is a diagram. The diagram which says in principle, the city of the future has to have urban agriculture in it. Now, urban agriculture, which we've shown diagrammatically as being alternate squares, in real fact, when you build the city on the ground, will consist of parks and other kind of open spaces, where we feel that food cultivation is of prime importance. The reason for that is that the price of food in urban cities like Delhi today is 3 times, we did a survey, the price of food in Delhi is 3 times what it is in the areas where it's grown. And I think that we have to shift our thinking on food production, and therefore the checkered board pattern essentially has at its a logical end, the fact that we need to mix agricultural production and urban living. Very much like Japan actually. Japan has, if you go to the outskirts of Tokyo, etc., you find the dense urban and agricultural activities absolutely juxtaposed with each other.
And so how would one go about planning a city? Because you've talked about natural cities, you've talked about that their size has to be smaller, much smaller than what we are seeing right now. How do you, I don't want to use the word control, but how do you actually balance the population with the number of people staying there, with the kind of space that is needed now? Would large chunks of land be needed, and these chunks of land would ideally be unpopulated in their present form? I mean, how would we?
You see, we are establishing principles of natural urbanization, natural cities. Our development of the idea of an ideal natural city is simply to explain the inherent principles involved, which are: you must be self-sufficient in your water, you must be self-sufficient in your food, you must be self-sufficient in your energy, and you must dispose of in a way that is non-polluting. And you must have employment opportunity. Now, the theoretical model that we have set up, according to our belief, is that no urban settlement should exceed 1 million people, because the footprint required to sustain 1 million people is possible. Beyond that, we feel that you will get an enormous deterioration, and the transportation problems of people, food and materials will go to uneconomical levels. So what we are doing is we are suggesting that the pattern of future urbanization of India has to change radically. We have to offer a choice away from the mega cities of today. And you will do that through incentives. In other words, you have to, even existing cities have to be audited for the amount of self-sufficiency they have. So you take a city like Delhi, or you take a city like Kanpur. If you did an audit for it, if you had a process of doing an audit for it and found out that food is coming from 5,000 kilometers, water is coming from, in the case of Delhi, water is coming from 400 kilometers, and it's still not sufficient for the city, we would have to really rethink it out. And I think we should be in a position to say, can we sustain 16 million people here? I would say no, because I can't go on increasing the size of Gurgaon and hoping that water will arrive from somewhere, because it's not going to arrive from anywhere. So we are establishing the clear principles for the future urbanization. Now, it's an interesting question that you put, how do you limit it to 1 million people? As I explained earlier, the core of the logic behind the city is participatory. So the democratization process is absolutely local. The way the policies of the city are controlled is absolutely local through its own processes. That's the best defense. If I have a city of 1 million people and I'm a participant and inhabitant of that 1 million people, and I have a good quality of life, I can get my food cheaply, I'm the first guy who will not be interested in increasing it to 1.5 million. Because I'll say, no, listen, I'm going to have to take cars, and I'm going to have to, my food price is going to go up. So can we make can we not increase the size of this? We have to have a non-coercive approach towards sustainability. That's basically where our thinking is at the moment.
How feasible is it for a city like this to actually come up, given that there would be huge costs involved, and one can't really do this without the active participation of the government?
Oh no, you have to do it with the government. You see, the thing is that when you say the social economic conditions of India, my contention is the social economic conditions of India are due to the fact of the way we are living, the way the urbanization pattern is exploitative, the way the freedoms, and I'm referring you back to Sen's argument about the whole of the growth of unfreedoms, the inability of ordinary people to live the lives they want to live. They are pushed around by the police, they are pushed around by the authorities, they don't get title to their land, they don't get water supply, they don't get electricity. So that's the cause of the human condition in cities. So we want to address that and say that the pattern of urbanization has to change. That itself will do the transformation. Now, you have to, you see, let's go back to the period when our mega city, the core of our mega cities was established by the British, which was basically Calcutta, Madras and Bombay. Now, the British made enormous investments in these cities because they were using them as exporting ports for the products of India and for landing their products for sale in India. So, when we say that we want to invest in a society in the future, yes, enormous investments are required. If you think that the investments required in current cities are small, it's not so, because a 4,000 square foot flat in Greater Kailash costs 18 crores. So what are we talking about? Investment levels, right? As one flat.
So Romi, tell me a little bit about the features of this natural city that you're proposing.
Well, first of all, it is a solution. It is not aimed at criticizing. I think we have a national pastime for criticizing people. So we are trying to put forward a solution. We are concerned about future urbanization patterns in India. We are concerned that we feel that the whole of the Indian civilization is going to be an urban civilization of the future. I think it cannot rest on the metropolitan cities that we have at the moment. Every century, every couple of centuries, urbanization patterns change. So we have to look at, we are looking towards the next urbanization, which is self-sustaining essentially. So we are proposing, the critical factor behind them is water. As in India we have very little water. So we are proposing to locate them on the edge of the floodplain and to use the floodplain as a reservoir for water, which limits the size. So the 1 million population limit is actually imposed by water. You see, we can generate power for 10 million people, but we cannot bring water for 10 million people. We have to shift the location. So I think we're talking about not only in terms of the services that we will be self-sustaining with, but we are talking about energy, we're talking about waste, we're talking about food. And we are talking from the microscopic level to the macro level. In other words, you as an individual who own a house also have to be conscious of your energy, conscious of your waste, recycle your water, minimize your electrical energy consumption, etc. It's only then that the city itself will become self-sustaining. So what we are also suggesting is that the discussion, urban discussions of the next century are going to be about human quality of life, not about how much money you have and how much you can accumulate. So we are preparing for that.
So what's the next step forward? I mean, how do you make this?
Well, what we are doing is we are continuing to work on the physical model and the philosophical democratic model of what is it that we require. We then have adopted a process of general discussion. So I think that our film that you are making will help us to spread and make an all-inclusive discussion, take comments, take suggestions, have debates about what we are proposing. It's not a coercive system, it's not authoritarian idea we are proposing. We are proposing an idea where we feel a lot of people will contribute. A lot of work has already been done in technology and energy, but very little work has been done on the philosophical issues, on the water issues. So we are closing those gaps. Hopefully, when we have had a round of discussions about this and made some presentations on it, we will modify it and start looking towards government to listen to us and convince them that the models that they're following are not sustainable. That would be our first and most immediate task. There must be a public debate about alternate ways of living. So we are engaging with that. We are proposing to give alternate informations as to what choice is available. Currently, there is no choice available. If I told you that life in Delhi is not good, so then people go to Uttarakhand and to Himachal. They think that's the other alternative, but it's not true. I think 50 years from now, we have to have a very, very different form of urban living. So we are preparing the ideas for that, and that's how it will grow.
You know, my final question to you is, a lot of people might say, look, tier 1 cities, fine, you know, they're really big, why don't we concentrate your efforts on improving tier 2 cities instead of entirely greenfield projects?
I don't think that we are visualizing greenfield projects. Let's put it this way, we are establishing the principles of natural cities on the basis of a greenfield project. However, those principles have first and foremost to be applied to existing cities. Now, if, for instance, if it is our contention that Delhi is unsustainable at 16 million people, I have to think in terms of relocation. I don't mean forcible, I just think that we have to produce an alternate place where people would prefer to shift to because life quality is better. And I don't mean having a flat which has a view of a golfing green or something that has a kind of club facilities. That's what property is being sold on today. It's an illusion because nothing can sustain that lifestyle for the scale at which it's happening. So we are putting forward an alternative. So if we approach theoretically the Delhi government and say that you are, in the next 50 years, you must make alternate plans for making new settlements. Chandigarh was a new settlement, Gandhinagar was a new settlement. Every settlement was new at one time. So we are proposing the new settlements. And we are insisting that we will design those settlements in such a way that their life quality, self-sustaining ability will be of such a high level that you would prefer to move out of the kind of metropolitan cities they were living in. Nothing, believe you, nothing can fix the problems of the metros. No amount of money that you dump in the infrastructure can fix it. Because 60% of the people are living illegally and in very poor conditions. So metros, roads, cycles.
So something has to be done.
Yes, something has to be done. We are proposing that we have to change the way we live, basically.